Welcome back to another episode of the Easy Button Investor Podcast with myself, Corey Johnson, and Tucker Merrihew. Today, we're going into a lot of real-time questions we're getting from our clients, people that are in our community, showing up for calls and engaging, people that are in the trenches, trying to do deals, trying to grow their business. So I think this episode will have a lot of applicable knowledge wherever you are in your journey as you build your business. So, Tucker, I know you just got off a championship. So
yeah. For as old as I am, I still play basketball. I don't know if that's a good idea or bad idea, but I mean, I'm not old, but in hoop years, I'm old as shit, right? So, not many dudes at 45 are playing, but we won our Naples League championship last night. Played a bunch of young bucks that were half my age. They weren't really happy to lose to the team they lost to, but we were a damn good team, and we were number one seed, and we followed through, and we ended up winning the whole thing. So I got this cool little trophy that's now in the office here since it was a company team. So it's pretty sweet.
Is the company team, as in like your company sponsored the team?
Yeah, I mean, I signed up the team for the company, and then I just kind of GM'd it and recruited players. There's one other guy that works for me is on the team as well. So there was more people from the company than anywhere else, but it was great. We won. We got a 45. You don't win many basketball tournaments usually. So unless it's an old person tournament.
Odds. The calf's better.
The caps?
The calf.
Oh, the calf. It's okay. I mean, you get old, everything. Things always hurt, man, especially when you play a sport like basketball. I think that's why people get into pickleball. It's a little, you got some quick movement, but it's like short stints versus like longer. And it's usually you're playing against somebody that's like 75 across the net from you. So it's not like you're trying to D up a 22-year-old kid that's still got all that youthful quickness and bounce.
Yeah, basketball conditioning. Basketball, everything's just different from a lot of sports. But congrats on the chip. Well, today, you guys, I think the first question that I got twice on this week's call from active clients was when they go in to negotiate, and I know Tucker did a lot of negotiation, when they go in to negotiate in a seller's living room or on the phone, something that a lot of people are struggling with that I haven't realized until the last really few weeks is, especially when they're licensed, right? And they're going in, but they want to do investment deals, how they present themselves in someone's living room. A lot of people are struggling with walking in. What option do they give first? What hat do they go in with? So that's the first question I want to throw out there for people listening that are licensed, that are trying to do investment deals, and they're walking into a living room, whether they're getting a lead from us or someone else. And in your experience, what's the best way to handle that situation if you are licensed and can do both? You have both options available to a seller.
Before I answer, I guess I'll preface it with, this is probably one of the more difficult dances that and I know you got the questions on your coaching calls this last week, but I mean, this has been like a reoccurring question for 10 years of people. Like, how do I solve this Jenga puzzle, right? And a lot of it, I think it boils down to, and I'll kind of get to the root of it and then we'll kind of build out from there. But I think the root of it is that if somebody is an agent first and then they become an investor, they have a real hard time taking that agent hat off at the appropriate time and putting the investor hat on. It's almost like you have to rewire their brain to, if you're an agent, okay, that's fine. But when you go to certain appointments, you're probably not an agent first, right? You're a question asker. That's really what you are first. And then from there, you can kind of decide which hat, you should put on. But I guess in terms of strategy, the best that I've seen work now over the years, and I'm not an agent, just full disclosure, but I've worked with a ton of agents that turned them into investors that actually bought properties and didn't just screw up and end up listing stuff or just left people confused and then they didn't do business with them at all, right? You usually want to qualify the property first, right? If it's a retail ready property, you walk in, I mean, there's a pretty low likelihood that they're going to exchange a lot of equity for ease of transaction or speed of transaction. It's just, not a high likelihood. Now, in a squishy market like we're in right now, more of a chance that could happen, but still, I would say that's a small percentage of people. If you walk in the house and it's just beat to shit and, it's not a retail ready property, then I would say, you'd say, okay, well, this probably should be bought by an investor. And then the only real question is, how much do they think it's worth in its current shape? Or are they delusional about its current condition versus what a retail house should look like? And from there, if they are delusional, then maybe it's a fixer that you actually get the listing on and you put it out on the market and you let it proof that, the market wasn't going to absorb at that price. And eventually somebody gets it at an okay price, not a great price. And you make your money on the commission there. But if they're just, reasonable people and they realize the house needs work, they just want a fair price, then I would never put my agent hat on. I would just simply, work that investor angle for as long as you possibly can. Because the biggest issue that I found is that you can confuse people, right? If you offer them too many options, it's simple to you, but it's confusing to them. And so you really want to gather as much information as you can and then push them one direction. That's been my advice over the years. And it's tended to work pretty well. But I'm curious what you think as well.
Yeah, my answers tend to be like, I always go back to like not being smarter than the typical seller you run into, because so many of us, like, we've forgotten more about real estate than they've ever known. Mm-hmm. And I often like the question I posed to the guy that asked it on this, his name's Ivan. He's a great client of ours. The question I posed to him was, when you were a senior in high school, how much did you know about off-market real estate and wholesaling and investing? Most of us knew nothing, but we did know what a real estate agent was. And I found typically in this situation, once you walk in with your realtor hat on, it's very hard to take it off, because that's what they're no uncomfortable with. They're not going to want to talk about anything else. And so I would walk in, like Tucker said, walk in discovery mode as a service company. Go on there to ask questions. You don't need to come in and blurt out, oh, I'm an agent, I'm an investor. You're just going to confuse them. Walk in and listen and talk to them, and then present a solution that you feel like is the best for their situation and how you want to transact on that property. So I wouldn't force it any direction for you guys listening that are trying to figure out how. And there's no right or wrong answer, right? The reality is sales in this business is so nuanced per person, per conversation, where a lot of it's just time in the seat, time in the living room, getting used to how to preface and package that. But don't confuse them. Walk in with one hat on and do a lot of discovery, and then present them the best option. And that's typically the direction that I go on that. And it's the more you complicate it in your head, the more you're going to complicate it for them. And then it's just going to be this whole tangled mess of, wait, you're an agent, but you also can buy my house. You're going to confuse them. So that's my 2 cents. The next question, which is an interesting one, and I know it's another one that kind of always comes up, but we have quite a few clients that have made the leap from working their job and running their real estate business to just running their real estate business. And I'm sure you've gotten the question, like I do quite a bit, when is the time to take that leap, right? If you're doing real estate deals and you still have your job, whether it's any kind of W-2 or corporate job, and you've done a couple flips or you've done some wholesale deals, what is your advice typically of when is the time to make that leap for someone if they're kind of one foot in each world?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough answer. I would say, and I have, I've coached a lot of people. One guy in particular, Roman, who lives actually in Cape Coral now, but he was a police officer in Ohio.
In San Diego, or is that a different guy?
Different guy. Yeah, that's Roman from Portland. This is Roman from Ohio.
Oh, gotcha.
Anyway, he had a job as a police officer, and ultimately he decided to step away from that job and just become a full-time house flipper. And he didn't love his job. It paid well and had retirement and, healthcare and all that stuff. But at the point that he stepped away, number one, I think it just felt right, like in his gut, like that moment felt like it was the right decision. But number two is he was also empowered knowledge-wise in terms of like how to create consistency within your business, right? None of the projects that he had were flash in the pan type projects, or his pipeline wasn't like, this one project that I got and then I'm going to quit my job. He actually went through the process of building this off-market machine that delivered him opportunities to purchase and flip. And, at the point that he felt confident in that machine doing what it was supposed to do, I think that's the point when he stepped away. And I think that's the right point for most people. Now, you probably want to make sure you got some cash stashed too. That's an important part of the whole thing, because the last thing you want to do is step away from your job and then, have the ship hit an iceberg, right? I.e. go broke or run out of cash, burn through all your cash. That wouldn't be good. But if you have, sufficient, cash reserve, and you've got a machine that you've built, your core business, whatever it does, it's predictable. I mean, it's not going to be super predictable, but you feel like you can rinse and repeat and do it over and over again. At that point, you should get a pretty good feeling in your gut that maybe this is the good time to, take that leap of faith. And it's always going to be uncomfortable. I mean, I don't know anybody that's left a job to go work for themselves that, was 100% comfortable about it, and maybe not 50% comfortable about it, because it's a very difficult thing to do. I mean, you're going from door number 1 to door number 2, as some form of an adult, which is challenging. So I would say it's never going to feel totally right, but I would bet there's a point in time when, it just feels as right as it can be in your gut. And that's when I would do it.
Yeah. My answer is always like, what's the downside risk? Because it's very different if you're 27 and single and have an apartment and your rent's $1,500 and you have a roommate and you have $100,000 in the bank from your W-2 sales job. Like, there's not a lot that can go wrong, because you can always get another sales job, and you have 100 months of runway because you have no bills, you don't have a family or anything yet. So that's obviously a different situation than if you have, like, one of our clients, Brandon Evans, who came to us, he was still working for Vivint, selling security systems in Utah, and he's one of their top sales reps, making $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year. And he's one of our best clients, closing 1 out of every 30 leads we send him. He's since left. He's in the last 8 months of working with us. He's since left his W-2, and we spent probably 4 calls in a row just talking about that. Like, is it the right time? And he has 2 young daughters. He has a wife. I think he just turned 30, so they're not old, but he's been able to stack some money. And the answer I told him, it was like, put away enough money where you have a year or 2 of runway. And he was making good money. He had a couple flips going. And then I said that it's got to be a decision that feels right to you. Because there's a lot of people that never leave their corporate job. And there's a lot of people in Seattle that are full-time at Amazon, but flip 5 homes a year, 6 homes a year, and it doubles what they make per year, and they love it. And they get to keep their W-2, and that helps them to buy rentals. That helps them to do a lot of stuff. So you don't have to leave. I think a lot of people get in this box of like, oh, I have to leave, or I have to become full-time. And the answer is, like, you can run a real estate business, not to massive scale, but you can do a couple of deals and work your job and leverage those together. And the best situation I typically see, and I'm sure you've seen this too, is where a lot of times someone's wife will have a W-2, and then they'll take the leap from their W-2 and go try to start the business. And her income can, worst case, kind of keep them afloat, and they still have that W-2 to buy rentals and stuff. I've seen that scenario a lot, and that was Brandon's situation. And that's part of the reason I logically explained to him that I don't think it was a bad move at that time. But your situation, everyone's situation is different. And I think you have to look at what you want, and then have a runway. And reality is, if you're a single dude or gal versus if you have a family, it's a very different situation on that.
Yeah. I mean, I was lucky in the sense that I never had a real job, I guess. Well, a real job, but like where I went and worked for somebody else and they paid me to be there for a sustained amount of time every week. I walked straight out of college and went into the world of essentially self-employment, or straight commission and then self-employment, right? So I never had that moment where it was like, I'm leaving certainty to go to uncertainty, right? The only moment, I've had a few, one where I closed down a mortgage company and moved into being an investor full time. But it was, at that point, I had lived in the self-employed world for long enough that I knew that I would survive. But it still boiled down to, I didn't close up the mortgage company and transition full-time into real estate investing until I knew I had a business that could create consistency on that side as well. And so that's why I said that about Roman. But because the last thing you want to do is kick your W-2 to the curb too early if you don't know enough and you haven't built out whatever the core function of your business is for marketing to generate opportunities. That's going to be the biggest thing. I don't know, it's different for everybody, but it's I think it's the greatest leap anybody can take, honestly. If they do it right, it'll set you free in life, which is a very, very cool thing.
Yeah. And I do agree that, I think at the end of the day, I have a current belief that to a certain extent, if you don't have an incredibly high stress tolerance, naturally, even a little bit, it can be a rude awakening. And so that's why I think it's so important to have just substantial reserves if you are going to make that leap and you're watching a job. So you don't go, Colin Tucker told me to leave my job and now I ran out of money. So the next one that is another difficult one to answer, but one that comes up on every call and came up for about 25 minutes. We talked through this on this last week's call, was the conversation around, it was Ivan again. He's a flipper. He's a realtor and a wholesaler. And his question was, when do I know what deal to wholesale versus if I want to take one down for a flip? Like, how do I make that distinction and that choice? My my immediate 2 cents, because he was explaining a deal that no one wanted, and he could like maybe get $5,000 on an assignment fee. He's like, oh, I'm just going to buy it. And my quick advice was, the ones that you want to buy if you're brand new into flipping probably aren't the ones that no one wants. But I want to hear your 2 cents on anyone that we have a lot of people just transacting, right? Doing wholesales, doing listings. If you were earlier on, you've done 1 flip, maybe 2 flip. How are you making the decision about what deals you take down versus what deals you don't, and you get rid of?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer this like whoever asked this got in a time capsule and fast forwarded 10 years in their life. And some of this you can kind of take to heart and apply right away. Some of it you're just going to have to kind of learn with time, right? But that deal, whatever that deal was, either A, he overvalued it, B, it needed a shit ton of work for the amount of margin that was on the other side, or C, it was going to still be a somewhat questionable property, even if all that work was done, and maybe a difficult sell, like a busier road or a bordered a busier road, or it had, smaller square footage, and virtually impossible or not worth adding on to, stuff like that. So, but in terms of like what I would keep, generally, you'll get the most for simple rehabs, but at the same time, you'll get exponentially more on the retail market than you would just wholesaling them. Like I've mentioned on a previous show, like, simple ranch rehab, right? You could wholesale it for $10,000. You could rehab it, get it turned around pretty quick and make $60,000, doing the rehab and selling it, let's say. That would be one that I would keep. But, it also depends on where the market is too, because in a hot market, everybody gets FOMO and they want to buy anything that has any margin on it, right? And that's the time when, you can more easily sell these larger projects where they got to punch out a shed dormer in the back and like make room upstairs for a bathroom and finish out basements and do all this stuff that really is a shit ton of work. And, I would wholesale those all day long in a hot market now, knowing what I know. We took a lot of those down over the years, and we did the work, and we grinded it out and sold them, and we made money. But it wasn't easy money. It was always hard money, to make anyway. So I think you have to look at, if it's a great property and it needs, fairly simple rehab, don't wholesale it. Keep it and turn it around and retail it. If it's, a long drive or, it's needs a ton of work, wholesale it, try and get rid of it, dump it. That would be my suggestion, because otherwise it's going to slow you down. It's going to bog you down, right? Unless you've got a, full on construction side to your business and you're able to handle that, it's not worth it. But even when you do, it's those types of projects still slow you down. They bog you down. And in terms of like dollars per hour, occasionally there you hit a grand slam, but most of the time your dollars per hour spent in a project like that is less than kind of the simple wham bam rehab that you can get done quick, get back on the market and sell.
Well, part B of that, what tends to come up in those conversations when we have them with, the 15, 20 people that get on those group calls is like the velocity of money part. If like right now, like in a lot of cities like Seattle, Denver, days on market's like 45-ish days. Right. With a small amount of concessions. I think the average concession is like $10,000 right now. So with that being the case, even if you remodel, you're amazing. And yeah, if it's a light rehab, you can get it done quick. Let's say to them, you're amazing. You can get a light rehab done in 4 weeks, like just quick paint, maybe some flooring, some cabinets. And then you get it on the market another month and a half, and then you close. So you're essentially at 4 months right now, even if you're great. Like if you're amazing, everything is on time. And if your average if your average sales cycle right now in your wholesale business is like 90 days, and you take the $15,000 instead of the $35,000, but you put it into marketing right away, there's almost an argument that if you keep doing that, you get a higher return on the money. That is if people actually put their money in. For sure.
And if that's the spread, right? Like 15 versus 35, wholesale that motherfucker all day long. That's a no brainer. Like,
that's the question. Like what is I think that's kind of a deeper part of the question of like, what's that amount? What's that difference in money got to be to make it meaningful? Because like, is it 15 versus 50? Is it 20 versus 60? Like, what is that?
That's going to be tough too, because it's a sliding scale of like how much capital needs to be deployed to take it down, how much work needs to be done, and how much time, right? So you've got all these factors that then contribute to widening that margin or shrinking it. I mean, for us, if we took down a bigger rehab, I mean, we always shot to make at least $100,000 or close to it, on a rehab, right? Or significantly more as we got into the higher price points. But if you wholesaled those, maybe we get $20,000 on it, right? So I don't know. It's different for everybody, but if you're not like dying to be in the world of construction, as part of being in this wide world of real estate investing, then you're right. You can probably, use that velocity and your skill set to find and sell deals with room on them and actually do better than if you're getting bogged down by a few rehabs and, you've got this giant marketing machine and you're trying to wholesale. Then you got these 2 rehabs that are just eating your cash and slowing you down and stressing you out. So it really depends on person, but I would say, if it's 15 for the wholesale and it's 35 or even 40 on the rehab, wholesale, get that out of there, because then you're done with it, right? You're not going to be spending however many hours at that project going over this, going over that, meeting with contractors or managing people that do. So, I mean, I don't know what you think the adequate spread is in your mind, but
my answer, and again, it's a lot of it's opinion, but my answer was one, like try to only learn one new thing at a time. So if you're wholesaling and you come across a deal, like I kind of want to flip it. One, make sure it's like a home run. It's impossible to lose. And so like make sure it's one of those where like you get a $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 assignment fee on it. And you just know the spread is there. So even if you go way over budget, it takes way longer, you're not going to lose your pants on it. Second thing is like, don't go into, I'm a wholesaler, now let me go do a studs down remodel. Like that's not gonna do anything positive for you. Try to just go into a property where it's literally just trash out and paint. So you can go through the whole process of funding the deal, getting a couple contractors out there, having them do just the basics, learning what it's like to babysit a contractor, and then eventually just add one new, maybe the next deal. Then you say, this home needs appliances and it needs some flooring, and then do that. And then, this home needs a roof, and then do that and build on it. But I think a lot of people get themselves in trouble because they go, I'm going to make $50,000 on a flip versus $10,000 on a wholesale. That's not the property to do that on, because you're going to, again, like Tucker said, you're going to take a lot of resources, time, energy, and bandwidth.
You know what I would also bring up too? And I've got a couple examples of this, maybe think of it, but a lot of people that start in the wholesaling side, they're fixated on being in like cheaper properties or cheaper areas, right? As like where they're most comfortable.
Crack houses.
And so you could very easily, just incorporate more expensive areas or finding, more expensive tear downs for builders in nicer areas. And you could make 5 times or 3 to 5 times what you would make taking down one of those cheaper properties, rehabbing it, selling it, and doing well on that profitability, right? So like there were 2 lots that I bought before I left Lake Oswego, and I ended up wholesaling the lots. I took them down. I was going to build, and then we decided to move to Florida. They were great lots. But at that point I was like, well, I'll sell them to somebody else, which basically wholesaled them to another builder, right? And we made like $325,000 on each one. If you think about it like that, I didn't do any more work to secure that deal. Now they built and sold the houses, and I think they made about $1.2 million or $1.5 million per, which is about what I expected out to be. But it's higher dollar and a lot of capital, and I was, we did pretty damn good for the amount of time and effort that we put into those properties, right? So I think that you can kind of combat that by, or should I rehab it? Should I wholesale it? By just kind of adjusting your focus a little bit, or expanding your focus to take on some of these areas and learn the values and what people are buying and selling for. And really just expand your profit margin that way versus taking down, rehabs and trying to squeeze out $50,000 on one of those versus wholesaling it for 10 or 15.
That's a great last point on that topic. Okay. Last question that we'll jump in for today's show is a question kind of around just like personality disposition, in the sense of we have a wide variety of people that jump on these calls. And one of the questions that came out, because we just kind of go down rabbit holes, one of the questions that came out was, based on kind of your background and experience, that points you a different direction in real estate. And I'll give you an example, like an IT engineer at a software company. If they're getting into real estate, should they be focusing on acquisitions and being on the phone with sellers, or should they just go straight to trying to rehab a project? Or, like Brandon, a career sales professional, very natural fit into working with sellers on the phone, getting wholesale deals done. Like, where do you see Because that's, I mean, everyone has different, a lot of real estate entrepreneurs, they come from they've had a job. Do you think there's a correlation between the type of work that you've done and the personality you've developed because of it and where you should start your real estate career?
Ooh, yeah. Well, the engineer probably shouldn't be on the phone doing sales right away. But at the same time, you really don't want to be an engineer and you want to be in real estate and you don't mind talking to people, doesn't mean you can't get much better at it with time, right? But generally speaking, yeah, those people are a little dry. It's a little tough for them to build rapport with wily, wacky, drugged out sellers, which is, one of the three we often buy property from, right? God, I don't know. I'm curious what you think on this one first.
I mean, I don't think there's there's no world where you're going to get into, and most of my question, because really what I thought the question was is is there a way that's not painful to start a real estate business? And that's really what I thought the question kind of was at the end of the day, because the way it was asked was kind of is there because of my background and my skill set, is there going to be an easiest way into this? And I think there's little things if you've done sales your whole career, you'll probably have a better time talking to sellers and less friction to start. I think the people listening, the important message is there's no non-painful way to run your own business. And I think that's why people get themselves in trouble, because of all the media that's out there about, oh my goodness, passive income and start a real estate business and go do some flips. There's no non-painful way to leave your job and start your own business and now have to deal with bank and entity stuff and managing contractors and every dollar you have to watch. There's no non-painful way to do that, no matter what your background is. But I do think there are some things that if you've been a career salesperson, it's going to be easier to do sales with sellers. If you've been a general contractor for a big commercial construction firm, you're probably going to have an easier time in the construction side of real estate. If you have a finance background, you're probably going to have an easier time when it comes to underwriting and understanding the economics of deals. So I think there's some strengths that you come in with, but that was my answer.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, the engineer is probably going to be pretty good at monitoring their bank account and putting QuickBooks together and, that type of stuff. Not so good at talking to sellers and meeting with them and sitting on dirty couches and listening to their crazy stories, at least initially. Now, the salesperson might be great at that, but they're going to be terrible at managing their money and managing the business and keeping their office, clean enough that they know where anything is. So, I mean, and the contractor too, generally, that's how they operate also, right? They're good with construction, but they're just not organized people generally outside of the realm of construction when it comes to the actual business and the paperwork and taxes and all that stuff. So, I mean, you're right. I don't think there is an easy way. I think everybody is going to have a deficiency somewhere or multiple, and you just have to, that's the world of entrepreneurship, right? You got to learn to fill those gaps the best you can. And then as your company grows, bring on additional people that really help you fill those gaps where their main skill sets cover your void, right? And so, for example, Dan's worked, he obviously works for Easy Button now as well, doing a lot of stuff, but we've worked together for, I think, 13 years now. And, he was always much more detail oriented than me in terms of the content stuff, right? I show up, I got an idea, I get it on camera, put it on the microphone so it conveys well, the message to people. And then he was detail oriented enough to sit there, edit it, make sure it came out good, and then put it out to the world. I didn't have the friggin' patience to do that, right? But that was my void. But I needed a rock like Dan in that skill set to really allow us to do a lot of things that we did in the past. And so, that's the same in any business and any business owner, So I would say it's not going to be easy. Everybody's going to have voids, but just try to do the best you can to kind of fill them for the time being. And then as you grow, just make sure that you add people that are different than you, right? That can kind of help cover those gaps and make you a better, business owner, essentially.
Yeah, it's very well put. When I got into, the only job I'd ever had was coaching in basketball. So when I got into real estate, I didn't have a background of any kind in terms of what was going to correlate to a professional, my business. And what I did is I knew that starting out, I wasn't amazing on the phone. You have to learn how to sell eventually to run a business and sell employees and working for you and keep them and sell a vision and sell the client. There's a lot of things you just eventually have to learn sales. Early on, I wasn't great, but I wanted to get deals done. And so what I did is I just went and found someone who'd done sales for a while and gave them a really generous comp structure and filled that void. And that's how I started my first real estate company. And I just kept doing that. And a lot of times I think people feel guilty coming from the corporate side because every project, like you don't cheat on your projects. Like everything's very, very, straight and narrow. And in the entrepreneurship, there's no rules. Yeah, you want to play in an ethical and moral way, but like you can go recruit people who are great at what you suck at. So yeah, we'll wrap there. Thank you guys for hanging out for another show today on the Easy Button Investor Podcast. We're really trying to bring you guys just real-time situations, issues people are trying to solve in their real estate business, just like you listening. And I think we all fight similar battles at the end of the day in one way or another. We just label them differently. So as always, wherever you listen to the show, podcast, Spotify, make sure to leave us a review and reach out on any social platform to Tucker or myself with ideas, people you may want to see on the show, topics you want us to cover. And until next time, you're only one deal away.